let's bring in now Senator Ted Cruz, who's joining us on the phone. He's got a brand new book called Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. And boy, we're seeing a lot of it. Senator Cruz, good to have you with us today, sir.
Vince, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Sir, on this issue, on Israel and Hamas, I'm looking at a recent poll that said that, voters over the age of 65, 95% of them say that they side with Israel, not Hamas. But once you get down to the young age, 18 to 24, 52% side with Israel, 48% side with the terror group Hamas. It feels like it goes right to the point of your book, sir.
Well, unfortunately, that's exactly right. That what this book focuses on Unwoke, is how the radical left has captured the major institutions in our country. And each chapter of the book focuses on a different institution. So it starts with universities, which I call the Wuhan lab of the woke virus.
Yeah.
That's where the virus was created. It's where it mutated. It's where it spread. And then each subsequent chapter takes another institution, so that I focus on K through 12 education, on journalism, on government, on big business, on big tech, on entertainment, Hollywood, TV, movies, sports, music, and on science. And then finally, the last chapter of the book is on China, which I describe as a nexus connecting all of these. And if you look at the rabid anti-Semitism we're seeing on campus and deep within the Democrat Party, it is a direct manifestation of this cultural Marxist takeover that is unfolded. And sadly, the Marxists always start with the children. That has been their approach in every country. And young people are being indoctrinated. They're indoctrinated in K through 12. They're indoctrinated in universities. And the reason the left, their anti-Semitism is coming out so profoundly right now is as you know, Karl Marx, in laying out communism, his worldview explained in the Communist Manifesto is that there is an irreconcilable conflict between oppressors and victims. And he viewed it on a socioeconomic spectrum, with the oppressors being the owners of capital and the victims being the proletariat, the working people. And his solution was a violent revolution of the proletariat to overthrow the oppressors and use government power to forcibly redistribute the wealth from the oppressors to the victims. And I describe in the book Unwoke how, starting in the 1960s and 70s, the Marxists infiltrated our universities, particularly our elite universities, and became tenured professors and administrators. And there, Marxism mutated. And so one of the first mutations was critical race theory. It uses the same communist lens of the battle between oppressors and victims, but instead of being socioeconomic, it focuses on race. And it posits that America is irredeemably racist, and the solution is for the victims defined by race to violently overthrow the oppressors defined by race. And we've seen it mutate to then be based on gender and sexual orientation and gender identity. And the reason today that the extreme left is so viciously anti-Semitic and anti-Israel is that they have coded Jews as oppressors, and they have coded Palestinians as victims. And so the cultural Marxists support the violent revolution of the victims, the Palestinians, against the oppressors. And it's why, for example, you see on college campuses at Harvard, my alma mater, 35 student groups signed an asinine statement saying that every murder, every rape, every child who was slaughtered by the Hamas terrorists are 100% the fault of Israelis, because cultural Marxists support violent revolution against people they've decided are oppressors.
Yes. Now, I've noticed that this Marxist framework allows the so-called oppressed to literally do anything they want. They can commit any atrocity they want. There's no limit to it, and it's all justified. Oppressors are guilty of everything and need to be taken down and destroyed. And this flies directly in the face of what Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. Under this framework, men are not created equal at all, actually. And it is a direct attack, in my view, on the United States.
It is, and the cultural Marxists hate America. One of the things I discuss actually in the K through 12 chapter is about what's being taught to our kids, and I recount a conversation with my daughters where years ago, one of my daughters came home, and it was Columbus Day, and she said to me, "Oh, Christopher Columbus is evil." And that's what she was being taught, that he was a racist, genocidal maniac. And I described, I said, look, I wasn't deeply vested in defending Christopher Columbus as a glorious hero. But I asked her, I said, well, we do have a federal holiday named after him. Do we typically name federal holidays after racist, genocidal maniacs? And I said, might you be able to think of any redeeming features about him? Perhaps the courage it took to board a rickety ship and sail west into the horizon off of what you thought was the end of the world, that intrepid explorer spirit, is that anything to be admired? And yes, it's true that he and his sailors carried from Europe, that they spread to the New World, and it caused death. But it was also the 15th century. And I said, is it relevant that nobody then knew what a germ was, and so they had no idea they were carrying diseases with them? And I described that story because then not long after it was Thanksgiving, and she repeated the same thing, said, oh, Thanksgiving is all about the Pilgrims oppressing the Native Americans. And this is the garbage that's being taught to our kids. And
yes.
The point I made in the book is those two illustrations that come straight from the cultural Marxist playbook, they come down to one central antecedent question. Was the Western settlement of the New World a good thing or a bad thing? Was the founding of the United States of America a good thing or a bad thing? And the cultural Marxists believe it was a terrible thing. And we need to engage on that central fight, because I believe America has been the greatest force for good, has liberated more prisoners, has alleviated more poverty, has produced more prosperity than any nation in the history of the world, and we've got to defend it.
One of the other pieces here, Senator, that I've noticed about the way they argue is that they're completely incoherent, and they will exclude very inconvenient facts. So they'll create this structure where they say, well, these systems are racist. They've been racist for a long time. I heard Cori Bush this very week say that Congress once abided slavery. That's why this institution's attacking Rashida Tlaib. It's all so crazy. And I'm sitting here going, well, wait a second. If you're going to attack institutions for their historic wrongs, why wouldn't you attack your own party? The Democrats have been the source of all the racism and prejudice that we can lay out in American history. In fact, Columbus Day, which you just referenced, was started in reaction to a Democrat lynch mob killing Italians in New Orleans in the late 1800s. And so we're just sitting here and now we hold Christopher Columbus in contempt because Democrats lynched Italians, and that's why we established Columbus Day? It doesn't even make any sense.
Well, and look, the Democrats' history on race, as you rightly noted, is disgraceful and shameful. It is Democrats who founded the Ku Klux Klan, exclusively Democrats. It is Democrats who wrote the Jim Crow laws. The Jim Crow laws were designed to prevent African Americans from voting, from engaging in civic life, and to prevent them from voting Democrats out of power. And it is Democrats who today widely embrace racism. Just yesterday, the United States Senate confirmed as a federal judge a woman who is Asian American who wrote in law school that Asian Americans, to be sufficiently woke, although she didn't use the term woke because it was 20 years ago, but to be, I think she said enlightened, must support discrimination, racial discrimination against Asian Americans. That if you don't support discrimination against Asian Americans, you are not enlightened, and instead you have given in to the colonial class. And it's complete Marxist garbage. And yet every single Democrat in the Senate voted to confirm as a federal judge someone who explicitly advocates racial discrimination.
All right, so Senator Cruz, let's apply all of what you're telling us to what we saw yesterday. We saw a bunch of elections play out in the United States yesterday. Yeah. Democrats overperformed any reasonable person's expectations because you think that everything's so bad because of Democratic governance that maybe some Republicans would win. Unfortunately, it didn't really happen on a big scale. So do you think that what you write about in your book, Unwoke, and what's happened to America because of these cultural Marxists is related to what we saw in this election yesterday?
So I do, and in that the left understands the power of ideas, and they systematically seized the organs of transmission of ideas, and Republicans systematically undervalue the importance of ideas. So for example, in my chapter on journalism, every chapter I lay out concrete steps, practical steps that are important to retaking these institutions. And so in the chapter on journalism, one of the things I encourage is for Republicans or libertarians who've done well in business, who have resources, to invest and buy organs of transmission of ideas. Buy a newspaper, buy a radio station, buy a TV station, buy a movie studio, buy a book publishing house. The left does this all the time. And so you look a few years ago, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post for $300 million. Now, Bezos didn't do so because he was bullish on the long-term profitability of print media.
Yeah.
He did it because he wanted to own the commanding heights of public discourse. And the problem is for conservatives, that the business people with the resources to compete at that level, they look at it and say, well, I could earn an extra 0.5% rate of return on manufacturing widgets in North Carolina, so I'll do that.
Right.
And that's how we've abandoned the entire terrain of ideas. And in my chapter on big tech, I talk about how Elon Musk bought Twitter. The most important development for free speech in decades was Musk's putting his money where his mouth is. And we need more people to do that, to fight back, because through all of these institutions, the cultural Marxists are engaged in indoctrination, and it has resulted in our country being in the mess we're in right now.
Yeah, indeed. So in addition to trying to play the short game as aggressively as possible and win some elections soon, 2024 is so critical. We've got to play the long game and restore the country and get especially our young people back on the right track, to be interested once again in empiricism, logic, reason, and to be able to think for themselves.
Amen. So I will say the book came out yesterday. It's available in bookstores all across America. You can also get it right now on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Books A Million. It's a bestseller on Amazon, which drives the New York Times crazy. And look, the book is designed, it's not a dry academic treatise. It is filled with stories. It's filled with real practical tips for, number one, understanding how did they succeed? How did they take over corporate America? 10 years ago, that would have been unthinkable. I break down precisely how they did it, but then I give real and practical solutions for how we take it back. So I want to encourage your listeners, go and buy a copy of the book. Buy it right now on Amazon. And in fact, Christmas is coming up. This book makes a fantastic Christmas gift. Buy a copy for your mom. Buy a copy for your brother. Buy a copy for your kids. Your kids need to understand what's happening. And the reason that I wrote this book is I think if we don't act, and if we don't act now to stop the destruction of these institutions, I think we will lose our nation.
I'm afraid you're right. In fact, I'm confident you're right. Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas. Sir, thank you. Congrats on the new book. It's Unwoke, How to Defeat Cultural Marxism in America. We'll talk to you again very soon, sir. Thank you.